Hello, everyone. This is Dabs again. I'm going to do a short introductory lecture on Shakespeare so that when you get to class and we begin studying our play, you will have a little bit of understanding about where we are in time and place, and that's important. So this is for all of my Shakespeare classes, and this is the first in a series of introductory short talks that I'm going to give that I want you to watch and consider before we really start getting into the play that we're covering. This is for all of my Shakespeare classes. So I'm not going to talk about one particular play yet, but talk a little bit about Shakespeare's background. At the end of this video, you're going to see a link. This is the first in the introductory series. This is the first. At the end of this video, you'll see a link to the second part. And finally, when I'm not sure if it's going to be, I know it's going to be at least 3, but maybe 4 videos. At the very end of the introductory series, you'll see links to the plays that we're considering in the class that you're taking, okay? Actually, you'll see a little, what's called a thumbnail, and you can just click that, and that will take you to, yes, another series of videos that are going to be made during the following semester. All right, so people get interested in Shakespeare's life and times, and so let's take a look at that. The internet Shakespeare editions. This is one of my favorite things in the world, not websites, things. And it is so because it has so much information on Shakespeare. I have it here, not on the main page. I've clicked on the life and times of Shakespeare. Of course, in one of my classes, we're going to be doing the text. And the life and times is what I'm going to show you here. Now, if we get into life and times, you will see that there is quite a lot of information about the life, the stage, society, history, ideas, drama, so forth. Now, I cannot hope to cover all of this in class before we begin the play, but if you have an interest, say, in Shakespeare's life or in the history of the stage, or in, like me, the society in Shakespeare's time, during what's called the Elizabethan era, I'll show you that in just a second, and that sort of thing, this is a good place to go, and this will help you. And I want you to consider these areas in your self-study. I'll probably come to some of them during my talks on our plays, but I want you to have this resource, and it is at the, just type in Internet Shakespeare into your browser and it'll come up. Okay, so that's that. And what I want to do is I want to move on to what I'm interested in, which I found out from experience is not always what my students or my colleagues are necessarily interested in. What I'm interested in and what bores some of my students. I live every year with the fear that I am going to bore one of my students to death. You know, in English, we say, oh, that thing bored me to death. We really didn't die. We just say it that way. But I actually am concerned because I see sometimes in the back of classes, students with their heads rolling around, they're trying to stay awake, and they really do look like they're in agony. And I feel so bad about it. It's sort of like I'm doing that to you. I'm hurting you in some way. But do I really, really find this stuff interesting? And so this is an old map, 16th century map called the Aegis map of Elizabethan London. And this is online. It's one of my favorite sites. There's so much you can do with it. And you see down at the bottom here, the citation and the link to the site edited by Janelle Genstad. And it's just a wonderful thing. It's been a wonderful thing in my life to have this map, and I'm showing it to you. Now, this is what London looked like, Greater London looked like. It was behind the old ancient walls even then. And if you've been to London, this might not be the first place you would go, because over here to the west is Westminster, where you have Big Ben and where you have the Houses of Parliament, and where you have Westminster Abbey, and all of the famous things are sort of over here now, along with Hyde Park and Harrods and that area of London. All of that was countryside. The actual city, now the borough of London, was right here. If you've ever been to London to the Globe Theatre, you have been to this part of London and you've seen St. Paul's Cathedral and some other famous things over on this side. And really in recent decades, they have the South Bank, Southwark, has really picked up because of the new remade Globe Theatre and a new Tate Gallery and so forth. For those of you who have been to London, you might have been to this section, but this in Shakespeare's time was all of London. And you can see people lived inside here and would come in from the countryside from all sides. All right, so I want to try to put you into London because even though Shakespeare plays, they traveled outside of London and performed, and so did other theater troupes and so forth. The center, the hub of the activity is London, just like the hub of the movie scene is in Hollywood, or now with Netflix, that's questionable. The hub of the musical theater scene is London or New York, that sort of thing. So I want to focus on London because I'm fascinated with the way London kind of appears in Shakespeare's play. But first of all, I want to give you some kind of understanding of the time period we're in. We're in the 16th century, the second half. Now, from 1558 to 1603, that was when Queen Elizabeth was queen, not when she was born, when she was queen for a very long time. And that's called the Elizabethan period. Now, that's one of two periods that Shakespeare wrote in, but when it comes to the plays we're covering, that's going to be the period that we're in. In the case of Hamlet, the later portion of that period, and also in Romeo and Juliet, the later portion of that period. But what I want you to know is that in the 1560s and 1570s, large public theaters just appear from nowhere. They're unprecedented. Yes, there had been theater, there had been festivals, there had been this and that, but these big theaters just boom, they just sprung up. Now, why did that happen? Well, there's several theories, and I have one, but this is a new and unprecedented drama and theater industry that came out well before Shakespeare. So Shakespeare sort of inherited that. I think that early bands, most of you have heard of the Beatles, they kind of inherited what was already a large following through radio, through little vinyl recordings that were distributed and so forth. So they could ride on that wave of new technology and they had that infrastructure. Well, Shakespeare also inherited an infrastructure. He didn't really start until the beginning of the 1590s, maybe the late 1580s, but around 1590 is when we start seeing Shakespeare plays coming onto the scene. And that's later in the Elizabethan period. Now, I want to point out here, this is, roughly speaking, this area was called the Office of the Revels. And I'm not going to make you remember that, but it's basically like in Japan, the Tokyo Union. It is the office that is in control of all of the entertainment for the court, for the Queen's court. And they would bring in trusted companies before Elizabeth was queen, but it really kind of picked up when Elizabeth became queen. They would pick trusted companies and plays and review the plays and then give the players resources to make the plays, all the stage devices that they needed, all of the costumes that they needed, all of the things that you need to put on a drama at a royal court, done here. And what gradually begins to happen, and you can see, and I'm pointing, this is St. Paul's Cathedral. You can't see it very well, but there were a lot of bookstores that were popping up there and all around central London. And what you see is that people were using these books. Now, just think about this. You're in Tokyo, you stop at a 7-Eleven or a bookstore, and you look at a manga. And then a couple of years later, you realize that manga has been made into anime, right? Maybe something like a major film that you go to Roppongi to the movie theater to watch. Well, that sort of thing started happening where the writers, they needed plays, so they went to popular books that were circulating around the city of London, and then they would take them up to the Master of Revels office and make plays out of them to perform at various courts where the Queen was during the theater season, which was usually Christmas and the winter season, but also there were some other special events. Okay, not to be too specific there, but this was already thriving. And then these troops realized, and I don't know if it's at the same time or maybe they were doing it before, but certainly at one point they figured that they could play these plays to all of these people out here, that the material was popular in books. It was popular with the aristocrats who are at the court, and it could be popular. And that's when we see theaters popping up. Now, I have to apologize for the next slide I show you. This comes from a map, and the theaters here are superimposed by a scholar whose work has influenced me for years, Andrew Gurr. But I'm told by certain people who are experts in where theaters were and how they're shaped, I don't want to bring up the globe yet, how they're shaped, that maybe he's a little bit off on this. For instance, the Curtain Theater is dated here at 1577. That's the first time we have a record of the theater. It could have been there before 1577, but it was certainly there by then. All right, but I wanted to show you over the Shakespearean period, some of these play houses appeared late. The Red Bull would have appeared after Hamlet appeared it would have been built after Hamlet appeared at the Globe. But basically, Shakespeare inherited these theaters that had already been built to play plays. Sometimes, in the case of the theater and the Curtain, which were two very early ones, sometimes plays were played there before they went to the royal court. You would try them out with the general public, see what people laughed at, see what made people scared, and so forth. But these two playhouses are very important early on. And in fact, for my class in Romeo and Juliet first appeared at the Curtain. Okay. For my class in Hamlet, it's very famously the theater, it was just called the theater, was torn down. The wood was taken all the way down and taken across the water somehow. We're not sure whether they used a boat or the bridge or whatever. And they made the Globe Theater roughly at the same time that we know that Hamlet came out. And Hamlet, there's several references in Hamlet that kind of give us a very good idea that it was played at the Globe Theater and some other historical things that we use. Don't worry about that, but that's where it would have been played. And I want you to see the location here. The modern Globe Theater is not quite in the same place. The modern Globe Theater is up closer to the water here. And the Rose Theater is very important during this time also, but I want you to get a sense of the Globe and where it stood on that side of the water. So let me move back here. So you're within walking distance, really. St. Paul's, you could come down here, you could be reading books, going to a worship service and then reading books, listening to the gossip around the cathedral in the big nave that is famous for gossip. You walk around here, take a boat over and go to the Globe and see a play. All right, so this is from the Braun and Hogenberg, Civitates Orbis Terrarum. And by the way, that would have been a book that was available to various members of Shakespeare's audience. And I'm going to do more with my Hamlet class on this in another video. So that's it. That is what excites me about Shakespeare, is to be able to have the image of the city of London in my mind and the theater, the playhouse, and to see things that happen in the plays that reference the lives of the people who lived in London or who could have been visiting London, and being in the playhouse in the middle of this metropolitan area that was very large by European standards at that time, and that had this vibrant book industry. And you had people who were reading books. Not that many people could read, but more people were beginning to learn how to read or sort of read. And the people who read could read the books to someone who couldn't read. This happens in Romeo and Juliet. So these stories start circulating and getting the imagination going, just like with Harry Potter or good manga. And then it's the challenge to put it into another, to adapt it to another form, like an anime, or to make a play out of it. So a lot of what we have trouble with in Shakespeare, some of the references and so forth, are due largely to the part that, to the uh, point that Shakespeare was writing for his audience. He wasn't writing for us. They had horses. I haven't seen a horse in Tokyo in ever, I don't think. Oh yeah, there's that time when the emperor comes through. Well, anyhow, so did they still use horses? I don't know. But anyhow, horses and a lot of other things too. So I like using that image and having that in your heads too when I try to explain some things that might be a little bit difficult. Okie dokie. All right, so I have to go now and make another video. Bye-bye.